Third time's the charm. Third time's the charm. War. War never changes. In the year 2077, after a millennia of armed conflict, the destructive power of man could sustain itself no longer. The world was plunged into an abyss of nuclear fire and radiation. In the early days, thousands were spared the horrors of the Holocaust by taking refuge in enormous underground shelters. The vaults of Vault-Tec. Welcome to the ethics of Vault-Tec. War never changes, but what about humanity? I'm Michael, also known as Cowboy, and I'll be your presenter for lack of a better word. Now, why am I doing this? Well, because I want to. And more importantly, last year, roughly around this time, I was taking a research and grant writing class for my minor, and we had gotten to the unit on ethics, where I, jokingly, taking a psychology class, and around the time I first started playing Fallout, remembered, oh yeah, they really didn't care about the ethics. Talking about how some of those went. And after the class, my professor, who had also played the games, and a classmate who had no idea about Vault-Tec or the Fallout games, like I think he knew of one, both inquired, knew how much. I mentioned that I played the games and was into the lore, and I was willing to make a presentation on the ethics of Vault-Tec. Well, the professor said I didn't have to. So a year later after graduation, and, well, Doc, I'm doing it now. You know, it's been a while, but I'm doing it. I finally got bored. So I'm going to start with some important base definitions. The first being of ethics themselves, which are the moral duties and obligations of proper and improper behaviors, by Rees and Fremois, I don't know how that's pronounced, from 1984. This was in one of my two textbooks, but I don't remember which one off the top of my head. That's why it has the in-text citation that is straight from the book. And then research ethics are the ethical principles that are expected when designing, conducting, and reporting said research. Now, how this presentation is going to work. I'm going to do the introduction. Well, I've already done the introduction. Then I'm going to do an overview of Vault-Tec. Now, this is going to be a long part and actually takes up a good chunk of this presentation, so I don't mind it getting forgotten, because I most certainly will forget the parts. In fact, some of it I actually did forget. Which, you know, I understand people won't be able to get all this, so I go back over it when it's actually important. Then I will go over the ethics, which I initially wanted to be as long, and then I realized how much detail I was going into the vaults, and said, no, I'm going to basically bore everyone to death, and I don't need this to be 10 hours. Then, I will be comparing the ethics reviewed in the previous section to the vaults directly. And then I've got some honorable mentions of the vaults that, while some aren't that unethical, they're either not the most unethical, interesting, or have the potential, but there's no real-world research correlating to it. There will be a big one in there. Going back to step 4 for a moment. How I'm going to organize them is in numerical order. The vaults, as I'll get to, are ordered by number. So I'm like, yeah, I'll do them in order of number. I will then get to the conclusions, and then I have my citations and videos that are sourced. Basically, there's information that I got the sources that were helpful with some of the information, but weren't exactly used as a source for information, but I felt this would be interested if you'd like to know more about said stuff. Now, for sorting the information, for the ethics portion of the slideshow, I used 2 of my college textbooks and actually bought another book just for this research. The 2 textbooks are Research Methods in Criminology and Criminal Justice by Mark Dunks. Dunsker and his colleagues, and Research Methods, How to Conduct Research in Recreation, Park, Sport, and Tourism by Carol Riddick and her colleagues. You can tell my major was in criminal justice and my minor was in community and commercial recreation. And then I went and purchased a copy of Research Methods in Psychology for Dummies by Doctors Martin Dempster and Donka. I'm looking at Doncha Hannah. Now, when looking at the Vault specifically, I used pretty much non-scientific sources, being the Fallout Wiki. Could I have gone through and actually collected a lot of the data by myself? Yes. But I think there's a phrase I learned in a class once of, why go and do your own research? No, let me put it this way. When you're doing a review, you don't need to go out and do the study. This is more of a review of the ethics rather than an in-depth research. Now, I will also make reference to the Fallout Bible, which is a piece of lore which is now considered non-canonical from Bethesda's written process, which the Fallout Bible was written by Chris Avellone, a designer for Fallout 2. Now, like I said, the Fallout Bible is the non-canonical source for Bethesda's Fallout, where most of the information has come from, since Bethesda now owns the rights to the Fallout franchise. But a lot of the recent notes on the Vault from there were actually used by Bethesda. Sorry, allergies are killing me today. Now, here's some need-to-know information, because not all of it is easy. Not all of it, everyone doesn't know all this. Some of the people watching this, or possibly watching this, might not know anything about Fallout. So, to speak of that is, what is Fallout? Well, Fallout is a franchise comprised mostly of video games. There are some board games. I believe there are novels. I might be wrong on that one. I know there's a few comics, and they're even working on a TV show. All of which are set after a nuclear war that raged for roughly 30, I believe it was 39 minutes exactly, on October 27th, 2077. Now, why is it set after a nuclear war? On August 4th of 1945, the United States dropped the Fat Man nuclear bomb on Nagasaki. In our timeline, and I'm dumbing this down because there's no real explanation that I could find, at least. We saw that power and feared it. And in Fallout, they coveted it and basically sought to use it as a more efficient power source. Nuclear energy went on to be the primary source of power in most of pre-war America after World War II before natural resources. I put in maybe the wrong name. I think I wrote that when I was half asleep and just never bothered to fix it. Basically, the nuclear power will literally power everything from people's home, from, plants, homes, to their own cars. As in having a gas-powered car, because there was a resource war going on around the time before the Great War, where oil was all but dried up, and there was barely any left, so everyone was fighting for oil. So, nuclear energy had to become more widespread. Now, they had still used nuclear energy beforehand, but on a smaller scale. Now, what are some differences between the Fallout timeline and our timeline? The United States in the Fallout timeline became a collection of 13 commonwealths plus the annexed Canada. However, no set collection has ever been fully given. We know roughly where, like, there's the Capital Wasteland, which is Maryland, parts of Virginia, and West Virginia. There's the Appalachian Commonwealth, which is currently, and I say currently because the games are still being developed, there are more to be spread out, which is West Virginia, so far just West Virginia. There's the NCR, New California Republic, which is not just a specific Commonwealth, but a widespread area going out, starting in California, which takes up California, I think parts of Oregon, Nevada, Arizona, or no, not Arizona yet, in that area. Vaults became a sought-after commodity, with Vault-Tec being so far as the sole beneficiary for the market. This is kind of incorrect statement on my part. In Fallout 4, in Fallouts 3 and 4, and I believe there's one in New Vegas, there are small little preservation shelters, which are basically, think a porta-john on the street corner, designed to keep you safe if a nuclear bomb just dropped. In Fallout 4, pretty much everyone you walk to has a corpse inside of it, so that tells you it didn't really work. Also around this time, an unknown virus with blue boils spread across America known as the New Plague. And the final one, which comes in handy, which I put in there because it actually came in handy, is that holotapes are used as digital storage devices. Think a cassette tape mixed with a flash drive, used to hold computer records, audio logs, even video games. Now, they're really simple video games, but it's still, like, it's roughly the size of a cassette, and they're able to store that. I know nowadays that doesn't seem like a lot, but a lot of the style of stuff is based off the 1950s aesthetic, which makes it more impressive. Why Vault-Tec? There we go. The company is fundamental to the Fallout series. Without Vault-Tec, 4 of the games wouldn't even be playable. And I'm looking at the mainline games, which are Fallout 2, Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and I know Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 76 are technically not mainline games, but like Fallout 1, you play as a Vault Dweller. Fallout 2, you are his ancestor, but that could be changed to anything. Fallout 3, you are a Vault Dweller. Fallout 4, you are the only survivor of your vault. I will get into that. I will get into Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 later, like their vaults, in a minute. Fallout New Vegas, you're a courier who got shot in the head. Fallout 76, the entire premise of that game is all of the people from Vault 76 play out, go and explore, which is why it is so far the only multiplayer-only Fallout game. I will keep my opinions to myself, mostly because I haven't played it and don't have opinions. They are basically the easiest to see the unethical experimentation in post-war America. While stated through in-game text and dialogue and records showed in pre-war America, very few companies actually viewed the laws as, laws and merely saw them as suggestions. Like, a lot of companies were overworked, underpaid, and basically would just ignore the laws entirely. Also, they serve as like a hypothetical extreme for the moral standards of scientific testing. Essentially, think of it as you're trying to say someone's a bad person and you just say, oh, they're Hitler. It's kind of that. This is the extreme hyperbolic version. And that's basically the entire premise for this is it's very out there. It's not meant, it's not meant to be taken seriously, but the internet, we have to take everything seriously. So, what is Vault-Tec? Running out of breath here. Vault-Tec is a fictional company who serve as an underground shelters for those weary of the threat of nuclear war. They quickly took the market by storm, and so far, monopolizing the industry. The slogan said it all. Prepared for the future. However, this was all a cover for the true reason they were founded. To do studies on humans after prolonged time underground, and how they would fare after a nuclear holocaust, and how different extraneous circumstances affected humanity. However, they only took a sample size of 1%, 0.1% of, I can't remember if that's the world's population or the United States population. I looked that up and I think the wiki even said it was only 0.1%, and I'm like, okay, that doesn't help. Now, Vault-Tec as a company has 17 subgroups, and initially I wanted to list them out. And then I realized that it was mostly the same different stuff, and I'm like, none of that will ever pop up again. But their bread and butter is the Vault, a series of 122 vaults with a myriad of different experiments and a handful of quote-unquote control vaults. I put in the quote-unquote because they're designed to open up after a set period of time and just be like, cool, you're free to go on your own. But no data is I don't remember if data is collected from them or not. Now, some of you might be wondering, what is a vault? A vault, which was actually trademarked by Vault-Tec, however, I could not figure out how to do the little trademark symbol, is a collection of shelters designed for the survival of the human race. However, in reality, they were used as a source of experimentation on the American population. Each vault was assigned an overseer who was meant to lead the vault. Now, the image underneath is actually the base image of what a vault would look like for some early prototypes or some earlier versions of the game. Later games have since changed how the vaults are laid out, to where most vaults are actually laid out much differently. But this shows a good example. Now, here are all the known vaults. I am not going to speak all of them because, as some of you can see, especially from, the right side column, 21 to 40, a lot of these are just unknown. We don't know where they are, we don't know where the vault is, and we don't know what it does. We don't know if it was an experiment or control. But we do know Vault 0 was the control where they would collect all the data was sent. It has not been explored in other games, but it was in the Fallout Bible, which to me said, hey, now we know this vault, they're actually collecting and doing something with the data. We just don't know what. The notable ones on this page are Vault 8, in Northern California, which later became Vault City, was Control. All the vaults with a star on it will become, I will go into more detail in later. Vaults 32 and 33 are actually going to be in the TV show that they are filming currently, which I'm excited to see. Vault 21 is in Nevada on the Vegas Strip. Here we have more. I realize a grammatical error. Oh well. Anyway, you can see a lot of these are unknown. Vaults 55 and 56 are actually very much tied together and are why holotapes are, I described holotapes. Vault 79, I actually almost didn't put as a control vault because it's only when we are able to explore it 25 years after the bombs fall and Fallout 76, it only has roughly a dozen, if a dozen people inside the vault. We don't know how many died, we don't know how many are alive, we don't know how many were in there to begin with, but they basically became Fort Knox afterwards. And it was mandated only by the Secret Service. And the last slide, the ones of note here are Vault 81, which is both experiment / control. I will get into that one on its own because it's fun. And the one I really wish we could have gotten to see it is Vault 120, which is sadly cut from the game. Like, they had plans and details made for it, and they even had some designs ready, but they just didn't get it made in time, and I'm sad that it got cut. Because Vault 120, as you can see, was in the Atlantic Ocean outside of Massachusetts, because it was meant to be a submarine vault, like it was under the water. And I was so intrigued. I'm like, oh yes, this would be awesome. And I don't know whether that would have been considered a control vault or an experiment, so I left it as unknown, because we don't know if it would have been like, oh, let's see what happens in here, or it could have also been, hey, let's see what happens if we put people underwater for extended periods of time but not let water in. Alright, now we get on to the control vaults. Now, these vaults were used to see how humanity would change through underground life, as any experiment needs a control. Now, currently there are 7 control vaults with the possibility of with the possibility of more to come, as the franchise is still ongoing. Currently, all but one of the control vaults were planned as such, as they were beginning to start the experiments. And I will get on to the one that isn't in a moment. Now, I'm going into the vaults in depth, so be prepared. Disney, please don't sue. Now, how these are going to work is I just have the type of experiment, well, if it was an experiment or control, what the experiment was, and the results. Social experiment, I put next to if it was an experiment, I put if it was a success or a failure, because some succeeded, some failed. Social experiment, vacant by 2281 when you explore it in Fallout New Vegas. The experiment was that the inhabitants of the vault were told that they had to sacrifice a vault dweller, the name for a person who lives inside the vault, each year. In reality, if the inhabitants did nothing, the vault door would be unsealed for them to leave and actually produce a message saying, "Thank you for not choosing to sacrifice. You are now free to leave." Now, the results. The vault dwellers decided that the overseer would be the annual sacrifice. This cascaded into a McCarthyist system of accusations to elect a person the vault could live without. By the end of this test, only 5 vault dwellers survive, and the corpses of 4 of them are found by the entrance, with a holotape explaining what happened to the other 5, quote-unquote survivors. I'll go more in detail into this on the actual ethics side, because this vault, if it was not because of numbers, this vault probably would have been the first. Vault 12, a medical experiment vault. I guess I did not put him in there. The vault was an experiment to see the effects of prolonged excess radiation, what excess radiation does to a human body. To do this, the vault door wouldn't seal shut properly. Result, the entire vault became a creature known as a ghoul, a creature that has been exposed to too much radiation over a prolonged time, and eventually led to the founding of Necropolis, a city of ghouls and mutants. Essentially, a ghoul in the Fallout universe, they're described as zombies, but even in-game they say that's really the wrong term. They're more of... Actually, no, I don't. Another thing about it, I don't know of a good way to explain that without saying they're ghouls. You know, as a guy who plays his games, that's what they are. They're basically... If a ghoul has too much radiation, it degrades their mind into being a feral beast. That is why there are ghouls and feral ghouls. Next up, Vault 15, a social experiment. This experiment was to put together the vault dwellers of radically diverse ideologies. Now, in a time where if you were even suspected of being a communist, you were seen as the enemy, this was going to be a fun one. Results, the vault's quality began to deteriorate, and adding on the overpopulation, the vault doors opened within 50 years. The group dispersed and created the town of Shady Sands, and raider groups known as the Khans, the Vipers, and the Jackals. Actually, the day I'm recording this, there was a video released about the Vipers, giving off some pretty good detail about them, which, had I not, if I remember, I probably won't. I'll put a link to in the description of the video for this. Next, Vault 19, another social experiment. This vault was split into 2 different sectors, one red and one blue, and the ensuing paranoia without chemicals or violence. This vault actually had 2 overseers, one for the red quadrant, one for the blue, which we actually don't know the outcome, but it was likely a success. By the time the vault was discovered, a gang had used in-game, a gang known as the Powder Gangers, real original name there, guys, was using it as their headquarters. But there are terminal entries explaining that there is unrest between the sides of the blues and reds when we go and explore, which I will get into more later, because some of it is fun, because that's just the human psyche. Vault 21, social experiment. To have all disagreements settled through gambling. This vault managed to survive. However, in 2274 on the Strip, where the vault was located, and it was given an offer to join the newly revived Las Vegas, which then was renamed into New Vegas. A multi-hour game of blackjack was played, and the vault joined the outside world, only to then be filled mostly with concrete a few days later. Pre-war capitalism at its best. Vault 22, a research experiment to grow crops to combat global hunger. A fungus known as Beauveria noricana was shipped to the vault, had mutated, and made its way onto one of the scientists and began to spread. This vault then became overrun with humanoid fungal carriers, and all the plants inside would mutate to basically have gigantism and be much more aggressive. Vault 34. Social experiment. This vault was overstocked with weapons. As a man from the South, that does not seem like it should be an experiment, but who knows? The results of this, the Over foresaw problems and sealed away the weapons. By 2231, a selection of vault dwellers decided to siege the armory and make a break for it. That selection of vault dwellers later went on to found the Boomers. Give me one moment. Vault 43, a social experiment to test the interaction between humans and a panther. Results unknown, as this vault has only made one appearance in the comic One Man and a Crate of Puppets, which this image is from. And judging from that image, I think the panther was pretty hungry, so I don't think it ended pretty good. Vault 51, a social/technological experiment. While this one, wow, I forgot to put this one in there. Anyway, the experiment in this one was to test an AI as an overseer. Results, through improper phrasing and the AI's learning module, it created a system where the dwellers had to fight each other to the death, but still didn't have overseer access. The real-world explanation for this is in Fallout 76, after its development, when it had first released. This was when Fortnite, PUBG, and all of the Battle Royale games had just hit the market and were taking over the video game realm by storm. So Bethesda said, screw it, we're hopping in on this bandwagon, and made a vault that did this. And using game logic, it managed to do that. There is lore about it, but not a lot of people wanted to go through it because it's just a bunch of battle royales. They didn't see it as that fun. Vault 53, a social experiment. The sports equipment was designed to break down after every few months, but it still be repairable. The results are unknown. This has only been discussed in the Fallout Bible, made by the original creators of the Fallout franchise. Next, Vault 55. All entertainment tapes had been removed. Unknown, just like the last one, only in the Fallout Bible. From here on forward, if it's only been discussed in the Fallout Bible, I'm just going to say unknown, only referenced in the Bible. I'm going to say only referenced in the Fallout Bible. Vault 56. This experiment was to remove all entertainment tapes except for that of one terrible comedian. Now, this vault was its sister to Vault 55 and was actually hypothesized to have collapsed sooner than its sister vault because the terrible comedian would make people want to go, make people hate it longer. Unfortunately, we don't know, as it's only been referenced in the Fallout Bible. Vault 68. A social experiment filled with 1,000 dwellers, 99 being men, and 1 being a woman. Results unknown, as it's only in the Fallout Bible. Vault 69. Nice. A social experiment, just like Vault 68, but instead of 999 men, it's now 999 women and 1 man. Results unknown, as this has only been discussed in the Fallout Bible and in the comic One Man and a Crate of Puppets. Vault 75, a medical experiment. Their experiment was the refinement of human genetics. Results. When the bombs fell, the students in the middle school, along with their parents, were sent to the vault. The parents were then all executed as the children were sent to testing. Those who performed well and were intelligent enough were harvested for their genes. After generations, the descendants of the children became a group called the Gunners, a militaristic faction in Boston after the war. You can tell where this one is going. Vault 77. A social experiment to see what happens to an individual after prolonged isolation. Results. After a few days, the subject found a crate of puppets, allowing him to give personalities before ultimately going insane. And as you can see in the 2 panels next to you, he is sent in there, and after 1 hour, he starts going a little bit crazy. Vault 81. The medical experiment / control vault. This experiment vault was designed to infect the dwellers with different viruses to create a cure-all. The results, the original overseer was informed of the experiment and decided to seal off all access to the experimental quarter and shut it down before testing even began, thus making the vault a control vault. Vault 87. A medical experiment to expose humans to something called the forced evolution virus, shortened to FEV, a virus made to bolster the body's immune system. Result. All of the vault dwellers became creatures known as super mutants or centaurs, which, while getting their name from the Greek creature of myth, have nothing to do with the Greek myth. The centaurs of the Fallout world are... The easiest way to explain it is an eldritch abomination, but almost not dog-like, slug-like in appearance. Not long after the vault was sealed, a single test subject broke free and took over, thus making more super mutants. If I remember right, this is something I should have researched but didn't because it's not really that important. As long as if you didn't have any radiation in your system, the FEV would turn you into a super mutant. If you had radiation in your system, you would become a centaur or worse. Vault 88, a prototype experiment vault. Basically, it was it prototyped technologies used in the vault industry. Results, this vault was left incomplete when the bombs fell and the tests were unable to be completed. It is its own section of DLC in Fallout 4 where you go in to the vault and make it work. You basically make it work and you can choose how strong or how powerful they are. This one's kind of getting ignored because you have control over this. It could be bad, it could be easy. We don't know. Vault 92, a social experiment to induce aggression through the use of white noise. Results, after the white noise was implemented, most of the vault went insane and ended up slaughtering each other. Now this doesn't work because I've had a very good family friend who used to work in radio installation for like speakers and movie theaters, and to test it they would play white noise, and he said white noise is neutral, it's not meant to do any of that, which is very impressive that happened. Of course this is fictionalized, but it's still interesting to say the least. Vault 95, a social / medical experiment. This vault's experiment was to place a collection of drug addicts in forced rehabilitation, and after the completion of the rehabilitation, to release a single cache of drugs. Results, over a span of 5 years, many of the vault dwellers were rehabilitated, if not all of them. A single Vault-Tec employee disguised as an addict, quote-unquote, discovered a cache and resulted in violence amongst the vault. Vault 96, a research vault, to view the effects of radiation on the local wildlife. Results. The quotas put forth by Vault-Tec forcibly pushed the scientists against their moral and ethical means. The scientists attempted to sabotage and shut down the vault, but were killed in their escape. Vault 101, an experiment vault. This is from Fallout 3. The experiment was to study the effects of the Overseer and their power in a vault that will never open. Results. The vault door was shielded shut, but fluctuated in having an open or closed door. I think canonically it only opened roughly 3 to 4 times, because most of them are, the Overseers are like, no, this has to stay shut. Vault 108. Another experimental vault. This one was to test how an untrained civilian would do as a vault overseer. The second test, because one was not good enough, was to test cloning. Results. The first overseer picked was to have found a rare form of cancer and projected to die within 3 years. The cloning experiments led their subject, known as Gary, to grow more and more aggressive with each clone. This eventually led to a clone revolt, which emptied the vault, with the exception of the Gary clones. And the mentality of said clones were so degraded that the clones could only say, Gary, and things along that line. Vault 111, the main vault of Fallout 4, a medical experiment. This vault's experiment was to test the effects of cryogenic stasis on the vault dwellers. Results: failure. Only 3 vault dwellers managed to survive the process: a man, his wife, and their infant children. None of the vault technicians managed to survive due to a food shortage. Now, technically, only 2 of the vault dwellers survived, because in the introduction to Fallout 4, either the man or his wife, depending on which gender you chose to play as, was executed to abduct the infant child. Now, I listed the child as, a survivor because the child survived the freezing and managed to get out alive. And if you look at the vault at the other chambers after getting out, or going back after the start of the game, you can look and see that all of them had failed. They couldn't open, and that the life signs inside were no longer there. Vault 112, a social experiment. This experiment was to place the vault dwellers in virtual reality under the control of the Overseer. Results: This vault was built in the basement of a garage. I sentenced that very poorly, as it needed far less space for its experiment. As in, the vault consists of 3 rooms: the entrance, the atrium, which just had the virtual reality pods, which were huge, basically flight simulators, and the Overseer's room, which had held his own pod. The dwellers were then under the impression that they would live a perfect life, when in reality they were to be under the puppeteering hands of Dr. Stanislaus Braun, who would change the world and quote-unquote kill the dwellers whenever he got bored. The vault dwellers continued to live for over 200 years, being preserved through the simulation pods, even when Braun killed them. Now, most of them don't remember any of it happening, except for one. And apparently, it's been a while since I played it, so I don't remember. In Fallout 3, so I don't remember. It's specifically known as Tranquility Lane. I don't remember if they actually the Vault Dwellers have been said to feel the pain. But considering when they are hit, they say ow and react, we can assume they feel the pain. Vault 114, a social experiment. This vault was not completed before the Great War. The inhabitants of this vault were to be governed by an overseer deemed incompetent by Vault-Tec. I guess they really liked the idea of someone not trained to do their job. Results non-applicable, as the vault was unfinished by October of 2077 when the bombs fell. While exploring this vault in Fallout 4, we can read a report that the man they chose as overseer ate Braxo detergent. He basically would eat borax. Now, we get on to the potatoes, which are the ethics overview. You can tell this is a lot simpler. So the definitions for ethics are beneficence, the welfare of or the benefits of individuals in the research that they receive. Communicative ethics entail professionally appropriate listening and conversational skills. Fidelity, establishing a relationship of trust between the researcher and the study participant. Feminist ethics, create environments for clients that are inclusive and incorporate the experiences of individuals whose concerns have been marginalized in the past. Informed consent, subjects and participants must be given sufficient information and have a complete understanding of the experiment and all possible outcomes. Wow, I mistyped that badly. And dangers of the experiment. Institutional review boards, government regulations that require organizations with federal funding, which Vault-Tec had, to establish review systems that oversee research dealing with human subjects. Non-maleficence, related to the concept of do no harm from McCrone, 2002. Professional Code of Ethics, norms, values, and principles that govern professional conduct and relations. Key terms, Belmont Report, released in 1979 after a series of unethical scientific research experiments such as Nazi prisoner tests in the 1940s, Tuskegee syphilis study, has three elements: respects for persons, beneficence, and justice. 2. Data falsification. All data is to be collected, analyzed, and reported truthfully, and all shortcomings or failures included. Deception. If it is to be used, it must be carefully thought out, and basically, don't lie. And then 4. These are key terms. I forgot to mention that. Oh well, I'm not a professional. Voluntary participation. While not mandatory, it must be reasonably obtained with no threat of harm coming to the participants. Now, to mix these two fields. How will this work? I will take an individual vault and touch on one aspect of how it goes against one of the previous points I have made in the last 3 slides, the last 2 slides, with a real-world example. While I wanted to consolidate the vaults to correlate with the focus of said vault, instead I went with the biggest issue first, and the vaults in numerical order. So, here's our biggest problem. Consent. In 1979, the Belmont Report proved there was a concept of respect of persons, which roughly means to have informed consent, where each participant is told about the experiment and what details ensue. While an official Vault application has not been found in-game just yet, we do have both a rejection letter and an exception letter for Vault 101, and from reading it over, it can be believed that consent was not fully achieved. The image is attached on the next slide. However, in the prologue to Fallout 4, during the character creation, you are given a short introduction of the Vault, where the Vault-Tec representative says, I am here today to tell you that because of your family's service to our country, you have been pre-selected for entrance into the local vault, Vault 111. And while we can't read the paperwork, the Vault-Tec rep never mentions any of these tests, and it is implied in later dialogue with him, because, surprise, surprise, he survives the war by over 200 years. basically, it implied that he was unaware of the testing going on in the first place. Because when you meet him, he says, "I'm here looking like a overcooked hot dog, and you look like a fresh TV dinner." And your character just says, "That's about right. I was frozen in time." Because Vault 111 studied, their phrasing is suspended animation. I call it cryostasis. Because that sounds cooler. Now, here's a Vault-Tec acceptance letter. I did not get a, did I get one? Nope. A rejection letter, but it is very much the rejection letter is essentially, "Dear reader, unfortunately, you didn't get in. Feel free to try again at one of our other vaults." Essentially, it just says, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Gomez, congratulations on your family's recent inclusion to the Vault 101 community. You will find outlined in your application materials a full review of rules and procedures related to preparing for shelter in a Vault-Tec facility, but we will outline a few key points here. Vault-Tec provides all clothing, bedding, and accommodations for residents. Personal belongings must be reviewed and approved by authorized Vault-Tec hermetics technician before such belongings can be delivered, and hermetics to the vault, to your reserved quarters in the vault. In the event of an emergency to the vault, no personal belongings will be permitted beyond the main door of the facility." Meaning, when the bombs go off, your crap's not going with you. All vault attendants must attend an orientation seminar. If you do not attend such a seminar as part of the application process, you will make an appointment with your representative. Blech. In the event of Vault-Tec activation, whether an actual or drill, the Vault-Tec will sound a siren audible in the immediate vicinity of the vault facility entrance, and the residents will be contracted via holotape message at the phone number provided and their resident profile records. Please report promptly to Vault 101 to await minutes and processing upon such a notification. Vault-Tec looks forward to having you and your family as valued residents. Be sure to present this letter to your Vault-Tec representative to receive your special commemorative Vault Boy bobblehead. Sincerely, Vault-Tec, Department of Public Relations, Washington, D.C. Now, in Fallout 4, we get none of this. The news just says, "We have confirmed nuclear strikes in New York and other locations," and the character just says, "We have to get to the vault now." And you start running. Vault 11. Here's the vault that got me inspired to do this. This vault had the experiment where once a year, the vault dwellers had to choose one person to sacrifice, or they all would die. In research, there's the concept of do no harm, where the goal, as described by Drs. Dempster and Hanna, minimize the risk of harm, distress, or negative legal consequences to everyone involved in the research process. This includes both physical and psychological harm and the fear or threat of death. Now, Vault 11. Social experiment of sacrificing one dweller each year to keep the remainder alive, and the vault dwellers know this, which, if you couldn't guess, instilled the fear of death in all of them. So yes, this is very much on very much going against the do no harm policy. And in Fallout New Vegas, you can actually choose to sacrifice yourself. Where an army of turrets and robots come out and open fire on you. Now, if you survive, which is not easy because they are very tough enemies to face, the door is still locked behind you. But it says, oh, they were meant to sacrifice. It basically says, yeah, this door is sealed for 1 year. If they do not sacrifice, the door will be opened. And it turned into a McCarthyist, basically a McCarthyist, which is a reference to Arthur McCarthy, a 1960s politician who was very much against communism and actively belittled and accused many people of becoming communists. And from what I remember from school, basically creating the term blacklist. Next, Vault 12. This focused on the impacts of radiation on the human body, not sealing the vault door shut as the Great War began. Okay, I had to reread that sentence. This experiment, like the following two vaults, is on this presentation for its real world equivalent. This one being Hiroshima and Nagasaki. While the Great War from the Fallout universe, countless nuclear explosions detonated in 36 minutes. Countless nuclear explosions detonated across the United States alone. Now, this is because, nuclear energy powered everything in the Fallout universe, including cars. So much so, in Fallout 3, they had a warning that said, hey, do not shoot the vehicles you see on the road in-game, because they are powered with nukes, and you will die because it explodes. Now, with Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we have a few survivors, though I think nowadays not many are left due to it being so long ago. But with survivors such as Kunihiko Ida, we have discovered that the radiation from just one atomic blast was enough to cause lifelong illness. And in the Fallout universe, the radiation caused all those vault doors to become ghouls, which, as I said earlier, are one step away from becoming feral creatures. So safe to say, that didn't look too good. Aha! I know I skipped one. Next up is Vault 77. This vault focused on complete social isolation. The Vault Dweller with the Vault Dweller's only solace being a box of puppets. This vault has a noticeable comparison to the use of solitary confinement in the U.S. prison system, which, not to get onto the legality of any of that, has been shown to lead to serious mental issues, being an increase in suicide rate of those who have been in solitary confinement for periods of, I think, 17 hours or more, going up by 2%, and homicide by 9%, which does not seem like a lot, but when the percentages already are, I meant to put the actual graph in here, but suicide before was shown at like 2%. So the suicide rate doubled, and homicide went from 7% to 16%. So it more than doubled. But I wanted to not overinflate the rate and wanted to give an actual percentage number. I don't think I did that right, but I did not want to run the risk of accidentally making it seem like it was worse than it actually was. Now, seeing that this vault was only comprised of one man, you would think the suicide rate would be important. No. Because there was also a crate of puppets, the comic includes regicide, as there was a king puppet who would rule over his subjects. And not to spoil the comic too much, but the king ends up being murdered. And I do say murdered because he is seen being with a large slash across his chest and the fluff that made up his body outside. and I think an arm is ripped off and an eye is torn out. There is, at the end of this presentation, there is a video linked, well, I say linked, I don't think you can actually view the video, but it's got the name of the video, and I put the YouTuber in there as well. Next up, my favorite, Vault 81. This vault was initially designed to be a medical experiment where all the vault dwellers would be injected with a myriad of medical diseases in an attempt to create a cure-all. Since the new plague was going around, the world really said, we need to find a way to prevent that from happening again. So that was designed to create a miracle drug. And we actually managed to get one single dose in the vault. Where in the vault, the first overseer shuts it down within 3 days before first stage can even begin. The first stage is on mole rats, which mutate, not due to the virus. Well, they might have mutated due to the virus. Because the researchers, there were only 3 researchers, and they managed to die off pretty fast. They managed to die, waiting for the signal to begin stage 2, which was human testing. Now, this vault shares an eerie similarity to the real-world quote-unquote experiment that helped create the ethical review board itself, that being the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. However, Tuskegee didn't give those participating any cures or treatments for nearly 40 years. To make a long and gruesome story short, the Tuskegee syphilis experiment was from 1939 to, I think, 1983. I might be wrong on that ending date. And if I am, please someone correct me. I should have wrote this down in here, but I didn't want it to drag down too bad. Where basically a bunch in Tuskegee, Alabama, researchers said, hey, let's take these guys and inject them with syphilis and see what happens. They promised them cures, but most of them were placebos. So an entire town was injected with syphilis. Now, this experiment was a fundamental foundation, dyslexia is acting up today, for the modern-day research ethics review boards. And you guys can see, I'm sure y'all can see why. Now, the fun one, Vault 96. Now, when I first read the wiki article, I thought this would be the most ethical, because I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. I would actually want to participate in this, because I was under the assumption, because I hadn't played Fallout 76, I still haven't yet. I own the game, but I don't have the stuff to play it properly. I need online, and I have to pay for that. I don't want to pay for that just yet. I thought they would use periscopes or other viewing technology like cameras or sensors to watch the wildlife in their natural habitats and how the radiation from the nuclear fallout would affect them, because, that made sense to me. No. Vault 96 was more akin to Noah's Ark, where instead of preserving life, they were subjected to cryogenic stasis and testing from sources of radiation in a controlled environment. Which, yeah, that kind of makes sense, but still, it's like, small scale, not that big. Anyway, during said experiment, Vault-Tec set very unreasonable quotas, which led to the researchers having to experiment with mutations and genetics. Due to these forced mutations and obscenely high quotas, by day 140... No, Wait. By 148, the quota count, they only managed to be able to achieve 148 of the quota of 568. So the researchers began to sabotage the system to leave the vault. Now, this bottom text is to be ignored because initially this was put in the first part and I just forgot to cut this out. This is more so aimed at the workers rather than the actual subjects, due to the fact that, hey, these are the guys you are paying, and you're literally not even treating them like humans. And while this seems like it'd be an oddball, no, there are other companies that had very similar standards. And I'm gonna be honest, we've all heard the rumors about Amazon. You know for a fact, if Bethesda could get away with it, they would have an Amazon parody in their vault, in their universe, that is just normal. Though they probably wouldn't, because almost all the other companies in the free world did that already. They limited bathroom breaks, they limited breaks, they limited meals. As in, if they didn't in this vault, if they did not reach their quota, they just didn't eat. Vault 111. This vault was designed to test the effects of cryogenic suspended animation on, quote, unsuspecting test subjects. Now, as the vault dwellers were led to the suspended animation chambers and they were told they were decontamination chambers. Once sealed inside the chambers, the experiment started. So it was like, oh yeah, step into this pod, you'll be in there for a couple seconds. It's just going to get rid of all the external disease, viruses, bacteria, all that you picked up along the way. Now, this causes a problem, as not only were the participants uninformed of the purpose of the vault, but they were actively lied to about the devices used in said experiment. That'd be like going to a doctor and them pulling out a needle and saying, oh yeah, this is meant to just gloss over your skin and look for specific bumps, when instead they're like, nope, you're stabbed. Now, this goes entirely against the informed consent clause of research methods, as while yes, they were informed, the information is wrong. Now, honorable mentions. You can note, I didn't put Vault 75 on here. Mainly because I forgot about it. And off the top of my head, I might actually go back and place one in right around here. Right here. Where that one, I would have to get more research done. But this Vault 75 bears striking resemblance to the Nazi Aryan experiments from World War II, where they would basically experiment on children to create... No, wait, that was just, I think, one camp where they, from what, I'd have to do more research. It could either be in there or an honorable mention if it wasn't what I'm thinking it was. Because Vault 75 was essentially making super soldiers. Those deemed strong were given for genetics, and once they turned 18, they would take DNA and sperm samples and use them, or egg samples, and use them to create more children. Now, anyway, the honorable mentions. These vaults aren't the most unethical, but have traits that have a historic example, or I couldn't find any decent research done on a similar topic. Vault 19. This focused on two separated and segregated communities, one red themed, one blue. While the chosen phrasing brings allusion to the civil rights movement in the early 1960s, The much more clear correlate is the Cold War. Now, this is the clearer correlate, as the Fallout universe focuses heavily on Cold War stereotypes. In Fallout 3 and 4, there is a giant robot called Liberty Prime, a reference to Optimus Prime, who speaks out about always looking for, who was initially designed to help protect Anchorage during a Chinese invasion, as the resource wars was mainly fought between the US and China. And it said, mainline is communist threat detected. Now, while the intentional manipulation of the two factions is a bit concerning, they may have used subliminal messaging. We don't actually know. We couldn't find many records could be found. And, there is actually an uncontrolled circumstance that aided in the paranoia. In the Fallout universe, in Nevada around the time, there's a company called Sunset Sarsaparilla, which made root beer. They were running a Sarsaparilla Star campaign, where certain bottles would have a blue star on the underside of the cap. And those bottles were shipped out before the campaign was announced. It just so happened to be announced on the day that the bombs fell. So, one of the vault dwellers in the red quarter opened up a sarsaparilla one day, threw the cap on his desk, and it landed upside down where the bottom was facing up. And he saw the blue star and actually made a note in there saying, "The blues somehow affected my drink. I think it's poisoned. I'm now feeling sick." Now, this is only an honorable mention, as the news has shown we humans do not need much to form a divide amongst ourselves. You can just make a statement and there will be people against you. Now we have Vault 68 and 69. Now, these are wrapped together because they're basically the same. They just swap the numbers around. These vaults bear a coincidental similarity to the 19 experiments which the media has called the sex raft. Now, this study was to see how people stuck together would react, and the researcher's hypothesis, it was only one researcher, which actually got confirmed, not confined. I did this on my phone, and my phone hates me. Confirmed later by the participants, who actually, his two results were either the participants would try to kill each other, or they would try to breed like rabbits. Well, both were technically correct, as the researcher was doing a very bad job of being an impartial researcher and being hidden. Now, to be fair, it was like a 25-foot by 25-foot square boat with very little space, where they would, some of the people on the boat would intermingle, to say the least. And at one point on the boat, on the ride, they all anticipated to kill the researcher because of how annoying they got on his nerves. And they had thoughts, but they never committed to it. Now, these two vaults are mostly forms of comedy. Just look at the number, and not to be taken seriously, but when you look at prison populations and all the number, there's a 4-letter word that starts with R, and it's a crime that feels like it would be a fruit of this. The phrasing is, it feels like it'd be a fruit of this tree. By that I mean, I feel like if this were to happen, there would be a lot of that in the vault. Now, Vault 112. This vault focused on virtual reality. The Vault's overseer had all of his dwellers placed in pods that acted as virtual reality, placing them in simulations at the overseer's whim. The one in-game, Vault 112 shows up in Fallout 3, and we are actually allowed to go inside of the pod to explore. We actually see, the current one is called Tranquility Lane. And the overseer, Dr. Stanislaus Brown, would torment his vault dwellers, and every few years he would kill them and change the simulation. He notably mentioned that one was a scenic Alps ski resort. Now, while I did want to look up experiments on the impact of augmented and virtual reality over a long, extended periods of time, I couldn't really find any, which, understandable. Now, here are my other points and my conclusion. Now, here are added facts with no place to go. 1. The phrase cure-all is actually a reference to Curie, a companion found in Vault 81. 2. The in-text citations are the McCain from 2001 and the one from 1984 in the definitions are actually from the textbooks themselves. Number 3, I did not expect to bring up the real-world Nazi prisoner experiments at the start of this, and definitely not the Nuremberg trials. Boy, I really set my bar low on this. Now, 4, this one initially was its own slide, but it was a lot more random than I thought it was, so I figured it'd just be better than at place. That there is a theory going around the internet which teases the idea that Vault-Tec itself started the Great War to jumpstart their experiments in a more controlled environment, which I posted the video on the final slide. Number 5, the nuclear conspiracy was not initially going to be, mentioned in the previous point, was not going to be in the presentation, but as I was doing my research, the video, either aired, or I rediscovered it. One of the two, I don't remember off the top of my head. And I'm like, this would be fitting for a side note, but not a main point. Because it's not, it's still a theory, it's not a fact yet in the game. So, until we get confirmed proof that Vault-Tec did start the war, it's only going to be a side point. Let's see. Point 6. Vault 96, after being abandoned by the initial scientists, was taken and used to create more super mutants with the FEV. Now, these super mutants made in Vault 96 were more akin to the West Coast variant than on the East. That being, there are two types of super mutants. One being a darker green, slightly smarter, and one being a sickly green. Now, the word vault in total on this presentation, by doing Control F to search, was said 359 times. Now, because I have added the word vault probably about a half dozen times, I'm going to round that up to 364. Meaning, I said vault as many times as there are days in a leap year. I just realized I said that word one more time. And fact 8. I conceived this presentation on Thursday, January 12th of 2023. Essentially, because, while initially in 2022, I did have the idea, I didn't have anything written down. It was just hey Doc, I can do this. I didn't have to, so I'm like, okay, cool. If I get bored, I'll do it. Well, on the 12th of January 12th, I got bored. And then I began work on Wednesday, January 13th. And I completed it on April 11th, 2023, and I am recording this on April 13th. A full 3 months February, March. Yeah, a full 3 months after I initially conceived it. Now we get on. Now, conclusion. From this presentation, it can be seen that Vault-Tec was far more interested in getting results than the well-being of not only the test subjects, but their other employees and researchers. While this is fictional and quite hyperbolic, it shows a very good example of how to not hold research with human subjects. Here are my sources. I tried to fit them all on one page. You can see where the word vault has come up quite a bit. And here are the source video. Vault 77 is the video I was talking about that went over the one man in a Creative Puppets comic. The Now We Know Vault-Tec started it. That is the video. That is the theory for them starting the war. That's just a clickbait title. And the Alkali, I don't think that's how it's pronounced, raft is what the media called the sex raft. As that is the end of the presentation, I hope you enjoyed, and I bid you all a good day.